let's restart. Teresa Presas will be the speaker at the beginning of this closing session. She will moderate this session with the presence of the CEOs and the representatives for our main industrial companies that are presented here. Please, Teresa, take the lead.
Thank you very much. Yeah? No, I don't need that. Eu não preciso. No, I don't need it. Thank you very much, Vitor. Thank you. Good afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be here again. I think last time I was here was 6 years ago, and I'm still here. So it's a very big pleasure, and particularly it's a big pleasure and a big challenge to moderate those gentlemen sitting at my left side. They don't need the introduction. I'm sure they are all well known to you, as well as their companies. So José Pina is CEO of ALTRI. Carlos Santos is in the board of RENOVA, board member of RENOVA. And António Redondo is the CEO of the Navigator company. You all know the activities that they are running, and you will hear more about it. I'm not going to make any description of it because it will be really, really too reductive. So I've been thinking about this panel, and I thought we could start from the end. Normally, at the end, you ask the panelists, what do you want to take away for the audience to be? But I think it's worthwhile starting from the beginning to ask them what they would wish that your takeaway from this session would be about the company, about the sector, of course, or anything that you might want to convey. So I will start with you, José, and then we will take it from there.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Tecnicelpa for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the introduction. I would lead with two key messages. The first one, which is, I think, obvious to everyone, is the sector. When I look at it, it's so much promise, so little time, and such big challenge. Because ultimately, given where pulp and paper is today, and now I'm focusing primarily when I look at Europe in particular, but the promise is there, we all know it. The question is, how do we actually make it happen? And it's a huge challenge when you think of it. It's not just, you already mentioned all the regulatory challenges, but it's not just that. There are social concerns. There are challenges related to access to competitive raw materials. There are challenges related to the qualification of applications. There are huge investment challenges. The cost of capital is not cheap, and certainly there are a number of different priorities. But that leads me to the second point, which is, not the second point, but mostly what I personally see is within this industry, the North is losing to the South. And I would say with the exclusion of China, even that China is essentially in the North still, but at least it hasn't changed any time recently. But when we look at the North, primarily the European, the North American industry, I see it losing to the South, whether it's in competitiveness, whether it's in scalability, whether it's in markets, whether it's in the leakage of technology. I mean, there are so many issues that are taking place that I think it doesn't leave us very optimistic long term. With that said, I think the industry has a tremendous future ahead of it, tremendous promise, as I said, and if we can, as an industry, be able to grab it and transform, because it is about transformation. It's not as much about the industries of the past as much as it is the industries of the future, then I do think there is a lot of opportunity for the industry, and again, particularly thinking of Europe.
Thank you so much. May I ask you, Carlos, to...
Hello, good afternoon. Are you listening? Yes. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm here on behalf of Mr. Paulo Pereira da Silva, which is the RENOVA CEO, that unfortunately could not be present and asked me to replace him, which I do with pleasure. It is a long time since my last participation at Tecnicelpa, and I see here so many familiar faces that I really feel at home. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. I'm not going to say that I feel a little bit squeezed here between António and José, but in fact, in the industry, we have different challenges, different problems. RENOVA, as you know, it's a branded company. We work essentially to promote and to develop the RENOVA brand all over Europe, and especially on the European market, Portugal, Spain, and Central Europe, which are our main markets. And the challenges are completely different and are related to the challenge of to have a brand on the consumer market. It takes time, patience, resilience to establish a brand on the market, and that's something that RENOVA needs to do and are doing with the competence and the efforts of all the people working at the company. So later on we can speak a little bit more about the market, but we need to keep the pace of innovation, which is very important for us. And we have, I think that's the same to all the companies. We have now a big challenge with the need to manage people in a different way. Yeah. The rotation of people and the difficulty to hire, it's quite a big change, but maybe later on we can speak a little bit about that. Yes, we can speak.
So it was a message that we wanted to convey to the audience. We have a note of optimism with José. Of course, Carlos, the challenges are there. You talked about innovation. It's also something very challenging, but not only challenging. And now I would like to ask António the same thing. What would you convey to the audience?
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for Tecnicelpa for the kind invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Also after quite some years to be back again to Tecnicelpa. I will not diverge much from my colleagues. We live through exceptionally turbulent times, particularly in the industry and particularly in Europe. Not only industry, not only in Europe, but particularly in the industry and in Europe. So I think there are two things that typically were for the industry nice to have, which is agility and flexibility. They were not at the core of this industry, and I think they need to become more and more core to this industry. Agility and flexibility and the ability to go beyond dogmas. We have still a significant number of dogmas in our industry. I believe we need to go beyond those dogmas, and I also think that part of the solution, was also expressed before, is innovation and sustainability. Innovation and sustainability as a foundation for both value creation and competitiveness. We have a very big threat of competitiveness into the European pulp and paper industry. So innovation and sustainability will be key for us to move away from that competitiveness challenge or that competitiveness threat. And going back again, we need to exercise more agility and flexibility in our industry and forget the dogmas. We know there are some dogmas that are founded on physics and chemistry, and those are going to be difficult to challenge. There are many business dogmas that we need to move away from.
Thank you, António. Thank you very much. Yes, you talked about the challenges that we have. Of course, we have geopolitical challenges, trade challenges, energy, raw materials, consumer restraints, let's put it retraction, climate, China, skills, a number of challenges. Now, what I would like to ask you is, how are you, what are you doing, what have you done recently, or your plans to adjust to these new realities? António talked about agility to the new economic strategies. There is really a new reality, a new dynamics in the industry. What are you doing to address them?
So I'll start with perhaps how do we look at our purpose and our value proposition. So the purpose for ALTRI is to make the world more renewable. And that's hinging on something that's at the core of this industry, and I think a significant advantage when it compares to what other industries are doing, and eventually what could potentially be opportunities for this industry to access a multitude of different applications. And I would hinge on what we see as one of our 4 elements of development, or pillars, whatever you want to call it, which we define as sustainability as a key element of our competitive advantage. And the first one deals much more in terms of how we're going to position ourselves, and going back to what I said initially, into the markets of the future. And if you're not focusing on the markets of the future, then you're really already passed by the dynamics of a very or a highly competitive or a hyper-competitive industry. So we have been focusing on taking part of the some of the key elements which we believe are unique within our own operations in terms of the efficiency parameters with how we run our plants. ALTRI has been considered recently one of the top 3. At one point, we were actually in 2nd place globally in rating on sustainability because of a lot of work we did around operational efficiency. And part of that is because both things go together. When we talk about sustainability, we're not talking about fuzzy hug the trees, go and admire the forest type of elements. Sustainability means economic and market advantage. So when we think of sustainability, for example, we think of, let's say, water usage. Water usage, if you focus on being as efficient as you can on utilizing a critical resource, and ultimately that means you're going to have a significant reduction, for example, in how you move water within your plant. The energy savings that you derive from having to heat less water, from having to move less water, from all of the losses, the thermal losses, the calories you lose at the end of the system, that usually gets to add to your economic competitiveness. So for us, sustainability is much more around how can we be as economically competitive as we can. And that sets the base for us to look into the markets of the future. So when we start, and we've had a recent announcement on transitioning one of our units, which for all purposes, I mean, these days you find new mills in the millions of tons, which is a scale, by the way, that Europe would I would see very difficult Europe to accept to build plants of that scale. Not necessarily because it couldn't, just because I think we're very conditioned in terms of looking at what could be very large, impactful facilities. But Biotech, which is one of our units, has been on a process of converting to dissolving pulp. And dissolving wood pulp, which it's a segment we've been for well over 15 years. It's an area where allows us to have a much greater presence and eventually evolving into the future technologies associated with the use of fiber, cellulosic fiber, for example, in textiles, be it technical or consumer or home textiles. And that's an area where cellulosics, and just as an example, and I've given this example repeatedly in the past, today represents 6-7% of the global textile in its broad sense industry, but it has a huge potential to access some of those key segments, and ultimately to invest into the bringing full circularity in terms of that market. So it's an example of what we see as a market of the future, but it's a market that requires a lot of capital deployment and a lot of innovation. It's a market that is thirsty for innovation. And that's where we see we have the ability to take on a steady approach, thinking of the new fibers, thinking of less impactful processes to produce the end-use fiber, as well as incorporating much more of a circularity concept in terms of how do we deal with it, with this industry that helps us continuously advance in that segment.
Thank you, José. I would like to turn to António with a question, maybe a funny one. Is sustainability still competitive? Because we have seen, you know, even financially, we have seen banks and financial companies retreating from sustainability. We have seen the European Commission backtracking in a number of things. So for Navigator, is sustainability still a competitive advantage?
It is, and it needs to be, for the protection of the industry in Europe. It is a differentiation factor from the competitors we have elsewhere, namely in Asia, but not only in Asia. So sustainability is a key differentiation factor. But we need to build a business case for sustainability. So I think we need to split sustainability in two aspects. When there is a business case, and very often are business cases that we can prove in our own companies. I will give you an example. In 2020, let me go back 1 year. By the end of 2019, we have announced a decarbonization plan that would reduce our Scope 1 emissions by 2035, 86%. And we started immediately by the end of 2019, early 2020. And we start by building a very large biomass boiler in our Figueira da Foz mill. It was a capex of 55 million euros. And we did it because we thought that was the sensible thing to do from the economical point of view. In 2020, we had the pandemics, and our shareholders were, rightly so, extremely concerned with all the investments we were doing at the time. So we had a lengthy discussion about should we stop the investment, should we keep the same pace, on what should we do? And we decided to keep the same pace. And eventually the boiler started up during the pandemics. When we revisit, and we do this very often, we do the post-mortem of the big capex investments. And we did it recently to this boiler. And although the boiler was a sound business case, so is why we have decided to invest in a biomass boiler, looking now to what has happened to the cost of gas, the cost of electricity, and the cost of CO2, we have decreased. I will not share the financial numbers of the investment, but I can share one. We have reduced the payback period by 25%. So the reality is 25% shorter than what we have anticipated. So my point is, we need to have a sustainability as a business case and not as a vague greenwash type of objective. This is one area of concern. The other area of concern, I'm not sure if you want to jump in that or not, is reporting and the burden on the European companies of sustainability reporting. Let me share also a couple of figures on that. Our last report that today is together, accounting report and sustainability report, had the participation on the sustainability part, had a participation of 90 people in the company, 90. We had the involvement of over 20 different departments. It took them about 8 months from the preparation until delivering the final report. They have analyzed over 1,000 data points. The report has 500 pages, and 200 of these 500 pages are to show how compliant we are. And this is unsustainable by itself. So we cannot pursue, so we need to make sustainability a business case, but we need to simplify, not necessarily dewatering, but simplifying the way that reporting is done in Europe. Because our competitors are not measured by the same level of concern that we are, and by the same port that we are. So we absolutely need to find a way, without forgetting how important is sustainability to deliver a competitiveness edge to Europe, but simplify reporting.
Yeah. It's a lot of bureaucracy, which is what companies are asking the European Commission to decrease, let's put it that way. Carlos, RENOVA is close to the consumer.
Yes.
Right? How important is sustainability for the consumer? Do they know what it means? Are they willing to pay more for the products they use if they are greener, let's put it that way?
I'm not so sure about that. Of course, sustainability is very, very important for every company that wants to be on the market today. But you know that in RENOVA we don't use a lot the term sustainability. We like to speak about harmony. And what we do in our activities is to try to be in harmony with nature, with people, with the consumers. And this is a work that takes decades. And we have a long history of working towards harmony. For instance, we are one of the few companies in Europe that are using extensively waste paper to produce recycled fibers to incorporate in our products, because we believe it's the right way to promote harmony. If you think tissue paper, it's not recyclable. So if it makes sense to use, we call it fibers from the urban forest to incorporate on the final products. How the consumers see this, I'm not sure. I think that we need to work the brand to improve the awareness of the brand for the consumers, and I'm not sure what is the impact. I was speaking with Jory a little bit about the communication in the paper industry, and sometimes I feel, putting in the place of a consumer, that we use too much technicality to explain what we do, the way we do it, and what are the benefits for the consumers. We need to appeal probably more to intangible arguments, the emotion, and all that stuff. But we have clearly the sustainability, it's very important for us. The harmony, we have a long history and a long tradition of building products with careful, and I really agree with António when he says that sustainability, it needs to make economic sense. And if it's the right sustainability, it makes to use less material, to use less water, to be more efficient, to have less emissions. This makes economic sense. And this is here that we need to put our efforts. And I really agree on the burden of bureaucracy. Inclusively, I have a little story, because last week I was mad with some of our teams because they were really occupied, and I asked them, what are you doing? And then we have a deadline to give an answer about figures, reports, and we need to comply this. Explain me, what are you answering, and what are you doing exactly? And I was astonished. I know that we have a lot of bureaucracy, and we have a lot of work that we need to do, but when I start to think, what is the added value of those activities, it's zero. I prefer them to have time to go to the shop floor, to work on sustainability and projects that improve our efficiency and harmony with the nature and the citizens. So we have a lot of work to do and mentality to change about this.
Since we are talking about your company, let's change a bit the subject to innovation. Yours is a very innovative company. We all know that. You're the sexiest paper in the world, which is great. Yeah. Great line, yeah. But you also innovate, this is in branding, of course, but you also innovate with your products. When I was looking at your site, I was surprised because I saw, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I saw that you are in the liquid soap business, that you are in what to call Magnificat. Let me just go back. But you're also working on, we also have a grease-proof paper. And that's interesting because we were talking about barriers here this afternoon. Is it something that could be applied, for example, in packaging or improve? I'm sorry, maybe it's a very awkward question, I don't know, but it's an interesting one.
I don't know, RENOVA, in fact, has started 8 years ago producing writing and printing paper and packaging paper. One of our stars at that time, in the 50s and the 60s, was the grease-proof paper that we produced for many, many years. And then at the beginning of the 60s, we decided to start the production of tissue, and we are really a company that founded the tissue market in Portugal, because the tissue market doesn't exist in Portugal. So we consider ourselves the founders of the tissue market in Portugal. And then from the 60s until now, all of our development was made around the tissue business. Meanwhile, we stopped the machines where we produced the packaging and the grease-proof, so we don't have anymore that kind of production.
Interesting, yeah.
And the soap, you read it somewhere, but the soap, in fact, on the way from home products, where we sell tissue for restaurants, offices. Usually the people ask us, okay, you sell the paper, but you need to deliver also soap, pens, pencils, and so on. So
it's on your website?
No, it's not. We don't produce soap. It's something that we buy outside of the company, because the customers, they want sometimes the full package of supply, and of course we need to do it. That's why. But speaking about innovation, you know, this is really keen for us. For us, we made a huge investment in a new tissue machine, and we made an investment in a machine with a new technology that allow us to produce textured paper. It's paper that we can mold in the wet lab, exactly because to make our business grow and establish the brand in the European markets, we feel that we need to do different products, high quality, and we decided to go for a different machine. It was the first machine in Europe using that kind of technology, and for the paper makers, they know exactly what I'm talking about. It's something that can produce paper with the quality between the conventional paper and the TAD paper. And this is so. Besides to have the teams, the culture, all the people at the company that needs to understand what is innovation, what is the importance of innovation for us, we also need to invest a lot to keep the pace of innovation.
Of course.
And we are doing it.
Definitely, yeah, of course.
I don't know if I answered to your question or not.
Yes, well, not about the grease-proof paper, which was, kind of the one that I would have liked to
yes, but
use
we are not producing any more greaseproof
okay,
paper.
no, never mind. Yes, you did. Thank you. But I want to take this tissue market that didn't exist in Portugal. It does exist now. And the Navigator has been growing this segment inorganically. Tell us a bit about it.
We have decided that we need to diversify our business areas. We were historically a producer of pulp. We are still the #1 producer of eucalyptus pulp in Europe and the 6th or 7th in the world. We diversified in the 90s quite successfully into printing and writing papers. We also achieved by 2009 the #1 position in Europe and also by coincidence the 6th or 7th in the world. But we saw that pulp was under stress because of the appearance of new capacities, larger mills, like José said, at very efficient cost structures, and then coated-free papers, more or less by 2007, start to decrease in terms of overall consumption. Overall consumption in Europe and in USA, in the world, is either stagnant and slightly decrease or slightly increase. So we said, okay, we can go double down pulp, we can go double down paper, or we need to diversify. And it came quite clear for us that diversification that was needed was the right strategy, and we started with tissue. We started with tissue in 2015, acquiring a tissue company here in Portugal. And then we doubled the capacity of that tissue mill. Actually, close to 2 years later, we built a new tissue machine together with our Aveiro mill. In 2023, we acquired a company in Spain, in Zaragoza, with one integrated mill, so paper machine and tissue converting. And last year, we acquired a company that has 5 different sites in UK. So it's a mixture, if you will, of developing greenfield projects, like we did in the first company we bought in Portugal, doubling with one machine, or in Aveiro, and now acquisitions. And I believe this will go, the path will go through. We will keep on either building capacity to feed our existing operations if it makes sense. Now in UK we are a pure converter, so we buy tissue reels in the marketplace. So we are obviously considering the possibility to build a new tissue mill to feed that British operation. Even in Spain, we are already selling significantly more than our own capacity, so there is also space to install tissue capacity to feed our Spanish operation, and we are looking very carefully to all other opportunities that might arise. I believe that the tissue market is going to change a lot in Europe, significantly, in the near future, and we are preparing for that. The other area of development, I will just make a quick note, is actually not far away from what was the RENOVA's origin, which is papers for the packaging industry, namely for food packaging.
And this is where you may need the greaseproof paper.
Absolutely.
It doesn't exist. José, let me turn to you now. Talking about innovation. Your company has been innovating in technology, also in market, also in your new products. Tell us a bit about the new technological innovations that ALTRI has been developing, and they have been quite successful in production, in cooking, in all these areas.
So I'll probably just mention a couple of projects, thinking through in terms of how we're driving towards operational efficiency. We had Most of these are developments, obviously, with partners. We had a development a few years ago where we installed a new small particle digester in Selby. This was developed jointly with Andritz, and it was the first such digester in the world. And that's typical of the type of developments we tend to do, because it's, I guess we're a little bit more prone to taking risks or calculated risks when it comes to ensuring that we continue to advance on our core objectives. But this was very much targeting the use of certain wooden fine particles that otherwise would be rejected or would go for energy value, when in fact it's still cellulose. So therefore, if you can reincorporate it and extract from it cellulose and incorporate it into the process, and in the end we're talking about a 2 to 3% efficiency opportunity, which at the end of the day is, well, you actually produce more still with the same input, so that's obviously attractive. But that's just one example. Another one, more on the, let's say, environmental side, also related to sustainability in biotech, number of, well over 7 years ago, but it's been gradually improving. We have a new wastewater treatment system that basically, I think this was a first globally, was the introduction of microfiltration into wastewater. So effectively, I mean, you could put 2 glasses of water on the table. You can tell which one was wastewater, which one was actually drinking water. And that was an advance towards our next step, which was actually to start reusing part of our wastewater back into the process, which we do already in biotech, and we're actually looking at also taking into the other plants. So that's just innovations, obviously primarily on process and efficiency and also environmental performance. But then you shift all the way to the markets. We have been doing a lot of work around research around textile fibers. We installed, again, with partners, in this case with CITEV in the north part of Portugal. We installed the first lyocell pilot line in Portugal, and the intent was really to use it as a platform to further develop functionalities or new functionalities. We had a project that was actually sponsored as well by the European Union, Fiber for Fiber, and that helped us advance and also learn from that process. But that gave us, in addition to some of the other projects that we have internally, that obviously I'm not going to go into detail, but it gave us the confidence, for example, to an acquisition we made mid this year, which was to take the majority stake in a Swiss filament and staple fiber producing technology, which is in essence is the first I would say ionic, I'll classify it as ionic liquid industrial produced fiber that actually mimics, replicates the functionalities of synthetic fibers. And that's a huge step forward, and it's going to require significant investment, it's going to require significant development, there's a huge learning curve, but it's taking those very focused, very deliberate steps in terms of not only being more efficient, but actually taking that and earning the right to actually leap into what I mentioned were industries of the future.
Okay. So you have a step now in a new country. You also have this investment in Spain that requires, as far as I understand, further environmental improvements or investments. But you already have such good credentials. So what else do they want? Sorry.
You want to talk about the Spanish project?
No, yeah, but no, very, very short.
No, but that's
very
okay.
Recent,
No,
very,
I have
very
no-
shortly. I know, otherwise I wouldn't be asking you.
I know.
But very briefly.
So I think it speaks to what I mentioned earlier in terms of the challenges for the industry to actually develop at scale in Europe. And this is just an example. It's an advanced 21st century industrial complex, which will be the first in the world integrated between going from the wood to a finished lyocell fiber. It was built on the most advanced manufacturing and operational technologies that we have already experienced in practicing. So it was bringing those capabilities onto a 21st century plant. What I mentioned about water efficiency, energy efficiency in terms of wastewater treatment, recycling of wastewater. Actually, this plant, just for you to have a sense, I mean, most of these wastewater units would be 15 plus 20 million investments. Just the wastewater treatment and the whole water system, you're talking about over 70 million, just that. Mm-hmm. So you have a state-of-the-art plant that in essence was in a place where unfortunately politics is convoluted. And at the end of the day, has had zero to do with sustainability, had zero to do with best practices, etc. I mean, if anyone can even think about installing and investing over $1 billion in a plant that would not only meet but exceed all of the criteria, obviously you have to be crazy, right? But this is where politics, and in this case Galicia is a microcosmos, but that's where Europe has a significant challenge in terms of how it manages politics. I mean, you go to Galicia, but if you go to Brussels, and Jordi will probably say the same, I mean, you have some pretty crazy people running around saying things that are completely out of reality. And that has real impact in terms of the industry competitiveness in Europe and the ability for Europe to actually continue to develop and evolve and face competitors from other regions that are not necessarily required to meet the same standards. Yeah. We had a recent, just very quickly to finish, a recent example. Europe is under threat, for example, for imports from, out of all places, Indonesia. Europe just signed a free trade agreement with Indonesia that potentially could be very impactful for the European industry. And it's almost like everyone, not the industry itself, but in Brussels, everyone is sleepwalking into a situation where it can significantly harm the European industry, an industry that is core and fundamental to Europe's competitiveness. Yeah. So, I don't know if I answer your question, but...
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Just because I would like to turn to the audience now and then come back to you. Is there any question that you would like to ask to our leaders here? No? Okay, so I will go on. You have to cope with me for 15 more minutes. This conference is under the title Forest Biobased Materials. Maybe it's, we have a bioeconomy strategy coming up in Brussels. God knows what's going to come out of it, with what we just heard. But both your companies are in the bioeconomy, let's put it that way. And then maybe Carlos can join us also in this. António, where are you in the bio-based products? And, in the future, do you think they will contribute to your to your portfolio, to your financial results?
That's a tough one, Teresa.
Sorry.
All our products are bio-based already.
Of course.
I guess you are speaking about the new bio-based forest or new forest bio-based products. I think there is still a significant business case to do as well. We need to move hype into trends, and to move all the hype we have into trends, we need the market test. We need to make sure that consumers are willing to have those products and willing to pay the right price for those products. And I will say in the majority of the cases, this is not yet there. I believe it will, not for all of them, but it is not yet there. And secondly, Europe needs to be, again, sending consistent right signals. And Europe does not send consistent right signals. I will give an example. We had 2-3 years ago a lot of hype about single-use plastic substitution.
Yeah.
And we feel that this has a bit vanished. And some of us, including ourselves, were investing in using fiber-based products to fight against single-use plastic. So this is an example of the lack of coherence, and this is an example that business only thrive if you have a framework, a regulatory framework that is stable. We cannot be moved to right in one day and moved to left in the other day. So going back to your question, conceptually it makes sense. I'm pretty sure that in a not far away future we will see some, and I will give you a couple of examples. Today I think there is only hype and no trend. Mm-hmm. I will give an example that a lot of people speak about, the usage of lignin. Actually, I know in one part of the world a warehouse that is full of lignin powder with no use, which, by the way, is dangerous, with no use. So I believe there are areas where the bio-based materials, the bio-based chemicals, or forest bio-based materials, forest bio-based chemicals will move on, but we are not yet there. I'm relatively confident that one area where we'll see an improvement, again, depending on regulation, but we see an improvement, is probably on biofuels and synthetic fuels, or using bioresidues to produce synthetic fuels. But we need to move from this. It will be very interesting to learn on the 12th, if I got it right, on the 12th of November, what is the new bio-based strategy of Europe. But I hope it's not a handful of nothing, because today, or until today, has been basically a handful of nothing. Having said all that, all our products are bio-based products.
Of course, no, of course, yes. As the title says, forest bio-based materials, not products, but materials. But, José, quer dizer alguma coisa? Carlos, would you like to talk about...
I was just tempted to say that we have the most difficult job regarding fibers between those two gentlemen, because our role is to take their fibers and make it better, you know. No, look,
you know what I usually tell Paulo?
I don't know.
RENOVA has a sexy paper. We make it sexier.
Yeah, I believe so. No, but you are speaking about fibers. We don't produce pulp.
No, I know.
We produce recycled fiber from waste paper, and we have a very complex operation that allows us to take waste paper and produce high quality fiber to incorporate on tissue. But one of the areas of innovation in RENOVA, it's in fact to work with the fibers to improve the quality of the tissue, the softness, to improve and to get a better contact between the tissue and the skin. We are doing a lot of experiments with different sources of fibers. For instance, one of our latest innovations was to use cotton fibers, textile fibers, to incorporate in tissue. And this is something that we are improving and that we are using. So we are using fibers. Of course, we need fibers to produce paper, but the way we look at the fibers, the work we need to do with the fibers, it's more related with the characteristics of the final product, the softness and the interaction and the result of the contact of the tissue with the skin. And we are doing a lot of work on that field.
Okay. Interesting about your incursion in the textile, because maybe José can say something, but tell me a bit about your inroads in bioproducts.
So we look at the opportunity for taking advantage of the existing industrial facilities as a biorefinery. And there's a lot to be said to that, because some would say, well, we are already a biorefinery. But anything that helps us take what today is a byproduct and add value to it is attractive to us. And we're looking at a series of those opportunities, one of which we're actually investing right now. We're installing an acetic acid and furfural plant in Caima. And that's essentially taking what was a byproduct that would be valued, eventually you need to deal with it somehow in your waste stream, or eventually in certain cases valued for energy. But how do you take a lot of the other stuff that is already in wood? Because today we tend to take advantage for most, I mean, essentially paper pulp, you remove lignin and everything else goes. But when you start getting into, and when you're involved in dissolving wood pulp, you have to deal with taking out a lot of other things. The hammies, and there's lots of sugars, and how can you value those for what they are? And in this case, acetic acid and furfural is actually, it's an existing market where the majority of the market is synthetic products, synthetic-based, but these are intermediate chemicals where already you have a significant, or already have a presence of natural sourced acetic acid and furfural, which actually sold at a premium. So it's an existing market. We had the advantage of having already, let's say the raw material was a question, how do we process it in a way that we can actually turn it into a valuable finished product.
So it's also about circularity. Yeah.
It's about improving our, or in this case, giving a useful life to a product that otherwise would have been considered as a residue, and adding value to it in a way that helps us also participate in an attractive, high-end valued market.
Okay. I give the audience the last opportunity to ask questions to this gentleman. No. Okay. Okay. Then I will keep asking you. No, but now we're going to have to quit pretty soon. So, yeah. I would like to ask you, what pain point keeps you awake at night?
For any of us in particular? Or?
Each one of you, of course. Maybe you
Fortunately,
have
I
the same
sleep
dreams.
well, so
Sorry?
I sleep well. But of course, I have some concerns about
the pain point.
the management of the mill. One very important is to keep the pace of innovation inside the company. This is very important for us, and we are an old company with more than 80 years old. How can we keep the pace of innovation? It's quite a big challenge. And Paulo uses to say a lot that we need to have the approach of a startup. And that's really true. And we have a claim at RENOVA that you can see all over the places, which is, why not? And this is a question that we do every day. Black toilet paper, why not? incorporation of textile on tissue production. Why not? And this is a claim that we are always looking every day at the company. This is a concern. How can we keep the pace of innovation? How can we have how can we work as a startup? Then something that's very important that we didn't spoke yet about this, it's the artificial intelligence. We are working a lot on that. Look, today, in the past we had, hire an operator or an engineer, and he will stay, it will take 5 to 6 years to train him, and he will stay until the rest of his life at the company. Today, we are preparing everything to receive people. We need to train them in 6 months, is 1 year, and we should expect that they will stay with us between 5 and 10 years. And this is a huge challenge, and it's a big change in the way that we receive people, we train people, and we prepare them to operate our mills. And this is an area where we are putting a lot of efforts, and it generates a big concern. Here we are using a lot of artificial intelligence to train the people, to make it easy to make their job. This is another area of concern. And then to the markets, the consumer markets, and I was telling António, and he knows this very well, to establish a brand in the market requires resilience, patience, and time, and money. Money, of course, but it's not like that. And we, as a branded company, we need to be really very aware that we need to make big efforts every day to gain market share. So this are the 3 areas of the biggest concern.
So you actually don't sleep so well.
In spite of this, I sleep well, fortunately.
Thank you, Carlos. José, your pain point.
I would say in a very summarized way, I mean, what keeps me awake is how do we remain as competitive as we can in a way that allows us to free up sufficient cash flow to reinvest in our future. And that's a constant. And there are many associated topics to that, starting with raw materials that I won't go into, but that's really at the core of it is you need to operate efficiently, you need to have, I mean, we have a very lean structure, at least we consider we have a very lean structure. We've had that always. I mean, my office is in a factory. All our executive teams are in the factories. We leave the day-to-day, obviously when we're not traveling, but we leave the day-to-day very much of the pulsing of the company. And I think that's for us really critical to ensure that we remain well-grounded. We continue to focus on ensuring that we have lean, very aligned resources that ultimately help us generate what could be the ability to have sufficient resources to reinvest. And it's a constant challenge on all fronts, and it's just part of doing it.
António, you have the last word now.
I will leave to the end if I sleep well or not. Look, we have forest operations in 2 continents, 3 countries. We have industrial operations in 3 countries, 2 within EU, 1 outside EU. We are the #1 exporter of containerized cargo from Iberia. We export from 6 European ports to 150 destination ports. So all the geopolitical tensions, all the uncertainty, all the volatility are embedded in our daily activity. Then, one thing that José already mentioned, and I fully agree, is the raw material access in Portugal, which is becoming extremely difficult, and if we are not all concerned, we should. And I think Tecnicelpa itself should be more a voice, a more preeminent voice vis-à-vis the political power that we have today, the government and the parliament, explaining the risk that a couple of governments ago was created by blocking the development of eucalyptus plantations in Portugal. This is the main risk that we have, I believe, in the country for the future of this industry are not the markets, are not the products, are the raw material. Yeah. So I think everybody in this room should be concerned about that. Related to this, another big concern is how can we guarantee long-term competitiveness within all this uncertainty, within all this volatility, within all this geopolitical mess, and with a lack of wood, how can we sustain long-term competitiveness? But now I can tell you, I sleep extremely well. And I sleep extremely well because of the main asset that we have at Navigator. Are not our mills, are not our forests, is our people, is the know-how. We have an extraordinary team that takes a lot of burden out of me. I'm not sure if they all sleep well, but I thank them because they allow me to sleep well.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we would have loved to talk about raw materials. I thought we would have more time, but raw materials and many other issues that we didn't have time to. But I want to thank you very much. Please join me in giving an applause to this fantastic panel. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for sharing with us your concerns and the challenges you are facing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Teresa, muito obrigada pela sua colaboração.
Muito obrigado.
Pela disponibilidade. Muito obrigada. Muito obrigada. Muito obrigada.